Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live, and damned if I didn't forget the date already. It's the 12th?
12th.
Today is October 12th, 2008. It's on the screen. How stupid am I? I get a view of the screen. Anyway, welcome. My brain's evidently not working, so it's a good time for, a lot of you theist creationists to call in and challenge me, because obviously I'm incapable of answering questions. But it's a good thing Don's here. So,
you think I can help with that?
I'm sure you can. I have confidence in you.
Okay.
Welcome. This is a live public access television show sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin. Our website's listed at the bottom of the screen, www.atheist-community.org. You can go there to find out more about the organization. There's a frequently asked questions page there as well for questions that come in on the show and an email, just kind of a generalized look there. As long as news and announcements about what the organization's doing, I'll hit some of those things today. The audio portion of this program is available as a download from the website. You can go directly to the Atheist Experience website, which is atheist-experience.com. There's also a link from the ACA website. The video portion is available for download or for as a podcast via Google Video. You can email tv@atheist-community.org if you don't get through on the telephone today, or if you don't want to. That goes to myself, the co-host, some of the people behind the scenes. We can't promise to answer all of them, but we definitely read all of them, and we answer probably way more than we ever expected we would.
Yeah, we're getting tons of them.
And we appreciate the email, all kinds of email, theist, atheist, supportive, non-supportive, constructive criticism, feedback, suggestions. There are people offering to help out with aspects of the show. We appreciate that. There are a lot of people who have taken clips out of the show and posted them to YouTube. If you go to the Atheist Experience website, there's a fan contribution page up there with links to a number of those, and some people have done a lot of really good hard work of picking out the bits that they like from the show, the ones that they thought were important. It's a 90-minute show, and not everybody's necessarily willing to sit through an entire 90 minutes. And so, we're a soundbite culture, so getting a few Atheist Experience sound bites out on YouTube has actually been an incredible help, and we're grateful to those people who participate. In addition to this program, the ACA sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. That's PROPHETS. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com for more information about that program. We don't take live calls, but we run a chat service in conjunction with the program. We have 2 additional streaming servers, thanks to one of the listeners, so we're no longer locked in at 31. We were hitting the cap every week, and there were people who were starting to show up in the chat room that were saying, I'd really like to listen and participate, but I can't. So one of our friendly and capable, technically savvy listeners set up a couple extra streams. I don't think that information's up at the website yet, but if you jump into the chat room, the information will definitely be there. On the last episode of the Nonprofits, we had a guest, Guy P. Harrison, author of 50 Reasons People Give for Believing in a God, who stayed with us for the whole show, and we discussed his book and a lot of other things. We're very grateful to Guy for coming on the show, and we appreciate the fact that the fans of the show also enjoyed Guy being on the show and sent him some nice emails, thanking him for doing one of their favorite podcasts, and I like that. I like that we're somebody's favorite anything, And I also like if we're on somebody's hate list, because that also means we're doing stuff right. And the email covers the whole gamut, everything from you nasty communists are going to rot and burn straight in hell to, oh my gosh, I love your guys' show. It's a big help, and we appreciate it. We got a call a few weeks ago from somebody in Japan, and was looking for other people in Japan, and that prompted a minor flood, at least within the proportions of what we would have expected, of other listeners in Japan. We'll be sending those out in an email so that folks can get in touch with each other there. There's a number of other groups starting up around the country, similar ideas. Hey, do you know if there's a group in my area? I probably don't. Even if I've heard of one, I'm probably just scatterbrained enough to have not kept track of all of them. You can take a cue from the ACA. Our group started with a simple ad in the newspaper calling for like-minded people to meet up for coffee. And 11 years later, here we are with an international monster of a show that everyone loves and should be on broadcast cable daily, maybe. I don't know if I could do 90 minutes a day, though.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
You need a little bit of time to prepare. Upcoming events and announcements. In addition to the programs, the ACA also sponsors a number of outings and events designed to encourage participation in atheist community within the Austin area. We have a lecture series every Sunday at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Those begin around 12:15. They're open to the public. All of our events are open to the public. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person who would like to attend is welcome. Membership's not required. We have an atheist happy hour every Thursday at the Dog and Duck Pub at 17th and Guadalupe. And after this program is over, we get together for dinner at Threadgill's on Riverside. They'll have the address up on the screen right now, actually. We're on the air till 6 o'clock now. We're on our new time, new channel. If you're locally here in Austin and you've been watching it on video, channel 16, 4:30 to 6 p.m., which means we'll get done for dinner around 6:30. Other things that are coming up, October 25th, we're planning a trip back up to the Hell House, and I've forgotten exactly where it is. We went last year. It's the
Cedar Hill or something?
Yeah, something like Cedar Hill. It's the Hell House.
The Hell House.
The one from the documentary. And we're going to be meeting at 2 o'clock at the Alamo Draft House by Lakeline, Saturday, October 25th. And we'll arrange some, once everybody's up there and has met up, we'll arrange some carpools so we can hopefully not kill the planet on the way up and save some money. I know that there's group rates involved, so that if you get like 10 people, you get a discount ticket for free. I'm not overly concerned about that, but I do want to encourage participation. Anybody who'd like to go with us, please do. It's a good afternoon out, and it's damned amusing, actually, and a little disturbing. The ACA has also compiled a voter's guide, which will be released in the next couple of days. What we did was we put together a list of questions and sent them out to 482 candidates for offices in the state of Texas and in the major national elections as well. There were 23 questions over 2 pages. We sent them out. They were simple statements, and there was the opportunity on there to everything from strongly agree, uncertain, disagree, and strongly disagree. We've received responses from 50 candidates. The results will be posted as an ACA voter's guide in the next couple of days so that we can get it in time for early voting. If you're in the Texas area, or if you're interested in the voter's guide itself and the elections, please feel free to stop by the website. There'll be more information there, and peruse the questions and answers. You can actually hover over the answer numbers when it's posted to see what the question is, so that you can assess their views in conjunction with yours.
Yeah, we're hoping that, these are questions that are of concern to atheists, and they're probably questions of concern to a lot of people, not just atheists, and a lot of constitutional questions, a few science questions, fair treatment questions, these sorts of things. And we're hoping that this effort will help people make a more informed choice when they go to the voting booths on November 4th, is it? And make a good choice and early voting, and make a good choice for the candidates. So we're a nonpartisan organization. We're not endorsing any candidates, but we are trying to provide some information that we think, questions that we don't think are being asked enough of these candidates. And to their credit, we've gotten a lot of responses. We have an over 10% response rate, and we're very, very happy with that. We're thrilled to live in a country where we can have this interaction with our candidates and solicit this information. We're thrilled to have these candidates respond to us. And we're hoping to do a public service through this. So. And
there's a good chance that we'll be continuing this in elections in other years.
Yes.
And we learned some things in the process about what to do and what not to do, and how to formulate the questions.
And the effort isn't perfect, but it's pretty darn good effort, I think, for our first time out.
But we'll be tossing out some press releases in the coming days to make sure that people outside of Austin, but particularly people within the state of Texas who have a stake in these elections, are at least notified and are aware that
we're going to try to do that. Yeah.
That there were results out there. Am I missing an announcement? Oh, there's a pub crawl, another pub crawl coming up.
Okay.
One of the ACA's more popular events from this past year. I wasn't there for the details, if it's going to go the same as normal, or if we've announced what pubs we're going to be stopping at. Right now, I think it's just a date, and that date appears to be Saturday, November 8th. We'll get more information out as we find out.
That's a ways off.
Yeah, exactly what we're going to do. So we've got some time, but we wanted to start letting people know. Was there anything else we need to let people know about early?
I don't think so.
I'm thrown off track today. My announcements are, I don't know, not up to snuff.
Okay.
I don't know what to do, Don.
Okay.
So
you put up the little sign that the announcements are done?
yes, oh yes. You can take it off pause now. You
Or fast forward to this
unfortunate
point.
people who don't live in this fine city and are unable to participate in all the goodies that we do
Move
for.
to Austin and come join us.
Yeah, come where the food is. To steal from, I think, Kennison maybe. So we're going to continue kind of with your topic from last month.
Right.
On scamlets.
Right. Well, yeah.
I don't know if, did you want to go ahead and take this one caller who's calling in
Sure,
real
we can
quick?
take a caller.
Because I have a sneaking suspicion that some of the people who call early may not be from Austin.
Hello.
Joe, are you there?
Yeah, hi, I'm there.
How you
I'm from
doing?
Austria. Oh, fine. How are you doing? Sorry.
I'm doing pretty well.
You have a question?
So I
or-
just wanted to call to say that I really appreciate your show. It's one of the best shows on the internet.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
That's quite a testimonial.
yeah, and I found your show on YouTube, no, on Google Video.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been watching, I don't know, this year, I think I watched every show from this year.
Okay.
And it's really cool.
Well, we appreciate that. Where are you calling from?
I'm from Austria, in Europe.
Oh, how wonderful.
Is that where you are now? You're actually calling from Austria?
Yeah, I'm calling from Austria.
Wow. See, you guys are setting the bar high. Last week we had a caller from London, so it's like, warring countries here to see who can get in first and fastest. But I appreciate the call, and thank you very much for the compliments. We're always glad to hear that the show is appreciated outside of Austin, because the original intent of the show, I don't think, had any dreams of a scope like this. It was
This is beyond our wildest dreams.
local callers, and the response from the internet has been phenomenal, and we really appreciate it, and we're going to do everything we can to keep improving the show and make sure it keeps going and serves what people are looking for, covering as much of the planet as we can, till we take over.
Yeah. So maybe one point I would like to address.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Austria, we have kind of separation of church and state. We're kind of a secular country.
Right.
But we have some issues. For example, we have crosses in our school classes.
I didn't catch what
Crosses
you said.
in the school clubs.
Oh,
So, yeah.
Yeah.
The Christianity is pretty good about insinuating itself into various, places.
now the question is, and I'm not familiar with the laws in Austria, is that a violation, or is it something that's permitted within the law?
I don't really know. I must do some research on that. But I find it interesting that in a nation, for example, I watched some of the stuff from the U.S. presidential election,
Mm-hmm.
and we had elections a few weeks ago, actually, because the old government kind of broke down, and they always argued, and so we had new elections, and you nearly never hear here in Austria, you nearly never hear one of the candidates, one of the parties say something about God or Christianity, and we don't have this.
Right.
For example, the first election debate in the U.S. was in a church.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in Austria that wouldn't happen in Austria here. So the government is really secular. They don't mention God or something like that. But but then we have crosses in our school classes, and I don't get it why, because I don't know, we have about, in Vienna, here as the capital of Austria, in Vienna,
Right.
we have 60% Roman Catholics, and but we also have a really high percentage of atheists. So I don't get these crosses. I guess there are, in some school classes, there is a majority of atheists, maybe, or other believers, but not Catholics. So I don't get this cross there in the school classes.
Well, it sounds like you might want to research your laws and see if that's a violation or not. It sounds like you're starting in sort of a better place than we are right now. At least you have a nation that's mostly secular in the government, and that's a good thing. That's something that I think our founders here intended, and that we're still striving for. But it's hard. Sometimes the majority feels that they should have things their way, even if that's in violation of the Constitution.
It's Article 6, right, Mark? Just to correct.
There's a number of constitutional
That Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution prohibits any religious test for public office or any public office or trust. And we've had some big discussions both on this show and off the show as to what the extent of that is, because obviously each citizen is allowed to vote according to the dictates of their conscience. I wouldn't have it any other way. And so there is potentially an interest on the part of voters to find out if their religious views are particularly important to them, whether or not the candidates agree with them or disagree with them on what their views may be. And so where does that line get drawn? Because obviously we're not supposed to have a religious test for public office, but what we end up having is sort of an implicit religious test for public office, where during debates, including debates in churches, we have questions that lead candidates into saying things that give the public an idea of what their religious beliefs are. And I'm not saying that it's not on some level fine for them to express. They're still human beings. But I would much prefer that we kept the debates and our entire government as secular as it was apparently intended, and allow our public servants and representatives to be maintain their private belief or the religious beliefs privately, still practice, still go to church, but there needs to be a separation between those beliefs and what their actions are while in office, because the fact of the matter is they're supposed to be there as a representative of all of their constituents, doing what's in the best of all of their constituents, or as many as possible, but also to protect minorities from the whim of the majority. That's the key thing about our Constitution that does this. And I see a kind of erosion of that secular nature that has been happening. I mean, it was kind of implicit even from the get-go. Politicians from the very beginning of our country always made references to God, whether it was a deistic God or I don't know that there's a president that we could actually qualify as an atheist. There are some that I think might have been atheists today, who were, deist or pantheists back in the day. But yeah, I think you're in better footing with not just a country that has established a secular government, but what I've heard from a number of people in various European countries is that it would generally be considered rude for someone to ask a candidate a question that leaned towards a religious response, that the tenor of the public is such that those are subjects that we don't need to go near. We're much more interested in, policies and ideas than giving someone time to, tell you how much they love Jesus or Allah or whoever.
Okay. Apparently we've dropped Joe by accident, but
have we?
Yeah, we have a little note about that. He got dropped by accident. Poor guy, calling all the way from Austria.
Well, he obviously watches the podcast or the show on Google anyway. So
yeah. So we're sorry, Joe. But you're right. I mean, we kind of have a crazy nation in many respects, where we have these principles that we, have been around forever in our Constitution, but they tend to get ignored. In some strange way, our Constitution is sort of the least enforced document. We don't have a body to enforce the Constitution. We have an attorney general who's supposed to do that, but in practice they don't.
I was wondering if I should start moving my mouth.
Okay, there we go.
Don's been talking, and I've been staring off into space, and I'm the one on film.
Okay.
Live TV. Woo-hoo!
That's right. It's Matt TV.
So, oddly enough, the phone lines are lighting up like crazy. I don't know how you want to divide this up, but you could probably
I
go ahead
can
and get
easily
started.
divide it in half if you'd like to do that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started and hit
so-
some points.
so
If you're
if-
on the line now, please stay on. We'll get to you just as soon as we can, but we want to get some of this subject out first, and then we'll go back to taking calls.
So this is a continuation of my September 14th show, where I introduced this term, this neologism, this new word of scamlet, which I define to be a simple reusable scam that religions use to make money and control people. And once you see these patterns, you see them over and over again, and as Matt said last time, they're sometimes a lot more subtle than I'm painting them out to be, that they're really sort of more subtle. I'm sort of painting the black and white picture on this show, but if you look around, you'll see these things. So scamlets are earthly reasons not to believe in what religions tend to have, tend to propagate, right? So they show how religions use deception to play on people's faith, which I think of as their gullibility, in order to advance themselves. So religions advance themselves through these scams. So, and the theme of these scams tend to be allowing people to think for you, leading to a conflict of interest. If somebody is thinking on your behalf and sort of making decisions on your behalf, they're not necessarily going to act in your interests. They're going to act in their interests, and so you get pulled along by the ring in your nose. So the question is, if these religions, if these institutions are lying to you about the small stuff, these little scams that I'm pointing out, then why should you believe them on the big stuff? So that's the question. Give us a call and let us know why you should believe them on the claims about God and miracles and souls and divinity and devils if they're making their money by manipulating you and doing scams. So the answer, I think, is you shouldn't believe these people. If they're telling small lies, you shouldn't believe them on the big stuff. And instead, you should have your trust in them eroded by these scams. So last time I talked about the scam of a special knowledge and special power, and the punchline there was, why don't these people actually use these things instead of trying to do marketing around them, that sort of thing. The other one I hit quite a bit was stealing credit. And I want to hit it a little bit more today because I don't feel like I really sort of gave it the punchline last time. So on stealing credit, last time we talked about how we have churches especially investing, I'll put quotes around that, investing in the poor, and when the poor end up succeeding down the road, they claim credit for it. Or if they don't succeed, they blame the victim. So there's this kind of stealing credit of people pulling themselves out of poverty, being down in the dumps. I talked about the prosperity gospel and how that's kind of a similar deal where you basically are marketing the fact that maybe you can aid in people's ability to make money themselves through their belief. So the churches in the prosperity gospel are asking for money from the people in the church with hopes of them making it rich through the aid of God or whatever. I've talked about faith-based charity where we have religious organizations getting donations and things effectively from the state and putting the stamp of God on them and giving to people, and so there's stealing credit that way. The donations and things come from the state. We talked about the Christian nation. Lots of examples here, right? The Christian nation is an example of stealing credit where the people Christians are claiming that we have Christianity was the reason why our nation was so strong, and in reality it's more to the fact that we have these freedoms and democracy and self-determination and these sorts of things, and those are really what make the Nation strong. Were you going to say something?
And the amusing thing is that we got an email claiming exactly that this week.
We get a fair number of those.
Yeah, it was essentially the argument was Americans are the greatest people on earth and we live in the greatest society on earth and Americans are religious, therefore religion can't be bad. And yes, I was happy to point out all of the things that are wrong with that. Well, I was going to say argument, but it's not really an argument. It's just a series of assertions kind of pinned up together. But the idea that all of the good things are because of religious folks, which really, let's be honest, he's saying Christian. He is a Christian. He advocates the Christian nation. He's saying, religious in general, and that all the evils of the world are because of the secularists and the atheists, and So yeah, there's a lot of stealing credit there. When in fact, there's probably credit. Pretty broad spread in all categories. There are religious people and religious institutions that have done great things and built universities and charitable organizations, and there are atheists who've done that as well. And there are some religious people who've committed atrocities, and I'm pretty sure when you go look at the records of who's in jail and what their religious beliefs are, you'll find that atheists are actually underrepresented. And what I found out the other day, because I used to like to quote that statistic, because I found some what I consider to be flaws in the ointment there, or flies in the ointment, not flaws, but
flaws in the ointment. There's a mixed metaphor for you.
Yeah. I'm firing on all cylinders today, boy. Ray Comfort, why don't you call me today? I think today, no, you'd still get your ass kicked. But as I found out later on, that those are actually entry statistics. So it excludes one of my objections was that people will
find religion
in the hopes of getting paroled. And in fact, those are entry statistics, people going into prison where they find out what your religious views are so they can arrange your own chaplain services, etc. So anyway, please continue.
Well, we talked about stealing credit, and this is much, much bigger than I even think I fully understood on the last show. For example, we have a lot of debate right now about marriage, and what we have is religions trying to sort of co-opt this marriage institution. Marriage is something that's been around a lot longer than the religions have, and a lot longer than the modern religions have. Maybe whatever, but this is something that religion is sort of irrelevant to marriage. You can have marriage without religion. We have atheists getting married all the time. You can go down and register your marriage, and it's meaningful to the people participating in the marriage. And so what we really have is we have the religions trying to say, well, we own this thing and it's good, therefore it's ours, and we're going to steal credit for it somehow. But religion is irrelevant to it. A couple other big ones I really want to hit today is morality. Religions claim that gosh, you're moral because of religious belief, and that's just patently false. If you look at the moral behavior of a lot of religious leaders, that should be enough to dissuade you from that sort of thing. And I don't want to launch into a long thing about morality because Jen did the show recently on morality. So
and also one of my favorite things from the last week or so that somebody sent me, and I'm going to kind of reformat it and twist it a little bit. This is such a silly claim, and if you really think about it, essentially you've got somebody who's in a cage talking to the person outside the cage and saying, how is it that you don't run around murdering people unless you're in a cage like me? That's how crazy that idea is, that religion has some kind of stranglehold on decent morals. And in fact, I'd point out, and I have a number of times, that a lot of the things that many of these religions project as good moral values are in fact, according to my views of morality, completely immoral. But
yeah, this whole threat of torture for finite crimes, infinite torture for finite crimes, that's crazy.
Or the idea that two consenting, loving adults could do something that they both enjoy that harms nobody else, and this is somehow wrong. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you can't sell me on that one.
Yeah.
Ever.
So here's another big one of stealing credit is the whole science thing, right? science has a lot of sort of power, right? We have all this discovery going on, this just amazing amounts of incredible inventions and technology coming from science, but almost nothing. Maybe absolutely nothing from religion. No contributions about the nature of the world or anything. None of that's come from religion. So we have people calling creation science. They're trying to co-opt the name and say, oh, it's sciencey. But in reality, what they're doing is they're picking and choosing the facts that they want to use and ignoring all the other facts. Intelligent design as science, that's another one. They're trying to get that shoved into science classes to basically steal credit from the science, and there's been no discoveries, there's no information that we've gotten out of intelligent design, even though it's older than Darwinism, than Darwin. So it's just it's a blatant example. Those are blatant examples of stealing credit. Creation of the universe. All of the God of the gaps arguments are an attempt to steal credit. If you don't know X, Y, Z, then it must be God. If it's magical and wonderful and unknown, it must be God. But really, all you're doing there is adding more claims about God. Unless you have evidence of a God first, and then evidence that the God did this thing second, the claims together don't add up to anything. They don't add up to anything at all.
Yeah, you might as well have said that the universe was created by transdimensional universe creating pixies.
Right.
I mean, whoa.
Makes just as much sense.
I got just as much evidence for them, and it's right there in their name that they create universe.
Yeah,
so there.
True. How about science-loving?
Science-loving. Transdimensional, science-loving, universe-creating pixies.
There you go.
You can't prove it didn't happen that way.
Yeah.
Just look at a tree.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite arguments.
They left the trees there.
Look at the trees, yeah.
Because, the trees are where pixies like to hide. You didn't know that?
Anyway, there's a bunch of silly stuff. Well, Exodus 20:15 says, "Thou shalt not steal." Right? Who said that in the Bible? Do you remember?
Supposedly, this Yahweh character wrote it on some stones and gave it to this supposed Moses character who came down and dropped it.
Yeah. But Christians don't believe that, right? Because they're stealing credit. Islam is doing that too. Judaism, a lot of these religions are stealing credit.
Well, it's kind of like downloading copies of music, maybe. It's intellectual property they're trying to steal. Maybe it's not so bad.
Right.
Yeah.
So the punchline, I think, here, and this is what I really should have said last time, is in reality, religions provide nothing that can't also be achieved by secular means. So they have to steal credit in order to prop themselves up. So that's why they steal credit. There's nothing there otherwise. Okay, let me hit another one, and then we'll take a break.
Okay.
Okay. The next one I want to.
So if you're on the line, just hang on. We'll get to you in a couple minutes.
The next one I call future reward, and this is like an obvious one, right? So in Wimpy, in the cartoon strip Popeye, there's a character named Wimpy who likes hamburgers, and he has this phrase, "I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today." And this is from the early 1900s. This is an old one. And today we see these sorts of things as in these Nigerian scams, these 419 scams that we've talked about a number of times on our show, where people will send you an email and say, hey, I got $1 million or $100 million sitting here in my pocket, burning a hole in my pocket, and I've selected you in all this, and just give me a little bank account information, and we'll schlep it right over to you, and you can do whatever you want. So most financial scams fall in this pattern of future reward. You're going to get a big payoff for a very small amount of effort, and you just have to ask yourself whether this makes sense.
By the way, this is one of the big benefits of atheism, because if you're an atheist, when you get an email that says, "Dearest brother in the Lord, I have trust and confidence that you will keep, that you will trust God and do what God wants you." I already know that they don't know who the hell I am, so it's not for real. It won't be long before I'll start getting Poe emails that are based on the Nigerian scams.
So these things I think are fairly easy to spot. Well, religions are playing the same game too, right? They're saying, oh, you have this wonderful soul, and gosh, if you just do the right things, like giving money to the church, this soul will experience eternal pleasure at some future time, and I don't know how things experience pleasure when they don't have any sort of bodies attached to them, but...
Right now, there's a Christian sitting at home watching the show who's desperately trying to dial in. The lines are full, and they were going to dial in to object to, churches don't say if you give money you go to heaven. And yes, you're right. We're well aware of what the doctrine actually is. We're talking about the practical application of it, where in addition to, for example, among Christians, sincere repentance and a surrendering of one's life to this Jesus fella, there's tithing expectations, and if you want to even pretend that getting money out of parishioners is not a primary, if not the primary motivator of religions in today, including Christianity, you've got a lot of work to do. And one of the things that somebody pointed out to me this week is that some of these churches are now hiring the equivalent of secret shoppers to come into their services and sit there and critique the elements of the service so they can improve their product, so they can make more money. You can get paid to go to church. And my first question was, where do I sign up? Because I've already taken trips to churches around Austin and I've got more planned. But, if they want to pay me to tell them what was wrong with the service, wow, that's kind of like what I've been doing for free.
So they wouldn't like what you'd have to say, right?
No, probably not.
So I don't know if you'd make a lot of money at that, Matt, but okay. The flip side of this is this kind of a soul extortion racket, and Dennis Lubay pointed this out from the nonprofits, that it's kind of like, nice soul you have, it'd be a shame if something bad happened to it. Right? I love that. So religions have concocted this elaborate metaphysical rat's maze that you're supposed to run through to get to all these different rewards and all these little things you have to do, and the Hail Marys and the donations and all this stuff. And there's heaven and hell and purgatory and limbo and nirvana and Valhalla and seven heavens and all this crazy stuff that you got to run around and do. And there's lots of hoops to jump for, but where's the cheese, right? Where do we know if anybody at all, anywhere, who's ever received these rewards? And the answer is no, right? We have never, nobody ever gets there, as far as we know, and nobody's ever come back to tell us. And that's the beauty of it, is that there's no way to verify any of these claims that go on. So what we have is a fear of hell, a desire for heaven, is the main motivation for believers. They'll tithe and worship and speak in tongues, go to door, sell out the Constitution, and all this stuff to get there. And the rapture version of that is kind of the same thing. So how do we know? Another scam related to this is purgatory. And this is a construction by the Catholic Church. It was a completely made up holding tank. Not that the whole thing isn't made up, but this one was obviously made up, where the Catholic Church, if they get benefits from you, you will have a lower amount of time in this purgatory before you go to heaven. And this is like a transparent scam. And this mechanism actually caused there to be all sorts of artwork and all sorts of donations and all sorts of power given to the church, so that because people were very much afraid of hell, and so that they could reduce their penalty in the afterlife. And just look at this stuff. And how do we know it's a scam? We have the limbo. All right, that was another made-up one. Well, this used to be part of the church doctrine, and now it's gone. Now they've said, oh, that was just a theological hypothesis, and this happened recently, right? So stuff is coming and going. Hell, once it used to be an almost universal belief, that's disappearing. Does that mean that hell is disappearing? Does that mean it's not a real place? I don't get it, right?
The big thing, you pointed out both of the problems, which is we have no reason to think that anybody's ever gotten this supposed afterlife, that a soul exists, that it persists after death, that it got to wherever it was supposed to go. And even if you assume that was true, you don't know that necessarily that's what happened. Maybe you've been duped and lied to. Maybe manna from heaven is like Soylent Green. It's people.
Right. So I think if you dig into this a little bit, you'll figure out that it's all made up. I mean, if you look at the various versions of what people think heaven are, they're just nonsensical. I mean, use your brain and look and think about it, and compare these to these old financial scams, the Nigerian 419 scam. You're going to get all this big benefit for this little thing that you pay now, which may seem little to you, but in mass, when you add it up with a lot of people, it matters. And if people really wanted to go to heaven, I would think they'd find a way to do it. Right? They'd do it quickly. They'd do it today. Why not go to heaven today? And if people really thought that this was true, we could set up some sort of mechanism where we can dispatch people off to heaven. Get the Muslims to go fight it out with the Christians in some sort of cage fight. They can all both be martyred to the same God. I can't think of anything more wonderful than having all these people fulfill their destiny, and it can be entertainment, for everybody else.
Tonight on the CW, round 1 of the Pathway to Heaven.
Now, not that I want anybody to die, but if you really believe this stuff, why don't we like put up or shut up? So let's take some calls.
Okay, we've got. Thanks for some of you for holding there. Is it Lilith?
Hey, it is.
How you doing?
I'm all right. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you great, better than everybody else.
And who am I speaking to tonight? Is it Don?
I'm Matt, and Don is here too.
Howdy.
All right. Hello. First, I want to say that I am Buddhist, but to me, saying I'm Buddhist would be like saying I am an evolutionist, I am a secular humanist, I am a Dantist. Well, I don't know if I want to say I'm a Dantist, which those aren't necessarily true. And this, I'd like to come back to a point that's relative to that.
Okay.
But I find the word religion and its adjectival form, religious, is a very difficult word to use when making an argument, because it calls into view something so big with many different parts that sometimes aren't related, that it can cause a misunderstanding, usually where the listener to an argument misunderstands what the arguer is trying to talk about, and it'll weaken the persuasiveness of an otherwise good argument.
Yeah, I see your point. What would you recommend as an alternative?
I've been thinking about that for a while, and I think that anytime, the only thing I can come up with so far is when I talk about religion and I want to address a specific part, or I shift from, say, its proposed metaphysics to what it proposes then to do in the world. I have to just make it clear that I'm shifting and I'm now talking about a different aspect. I think we have a lack of words to accurately describe the parts of religion, particularly in the common parlance.
I think one of the reasons for that, probably, and I agree that we may be lacking words in a lot of areas like that. Tracy did a show a week or two ago talking about, it was 2 weeks ago, I think, the simple phrase "God exists," and how in most of the conversations where that is the topic, neither of those words are particularly defined very well. And
usually.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably the same case with religion. It's definitely the case with spirituality, which is a word I absolutely abhor because it doesn't even tell me anything. It is so widely used. It's more widely used than religion, which has diluted it to a point where I need clarification. Tell me, which is why my mantra on the show is, tell me what you believe and why, and I'll be happy to talk about it.
Well, it's getting to the point of being similar to conservative or liberal, where there are two different usages, and they're both opposite, and nobody seems to realize it, and the word has basically lost meaning. It just has a usage. And religions are like the chimera or the hydra. They are multi-headed works of fiction.
Yes, they are.
And when we argue against them, I think it's, especially for the to be persuasive in our arguments, we must make sure we target one specific head, slice it clean with a foul stroke, and sear it off with the hope that it never returns again.
Well, I wish it were that easy.
But I think that should be the goal of our rhetoric, especially. It's hard when we're speaking, of course.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. And
then
the problem is that there's so many heads.
There's so many
Yeah.
heads.
But I'd like to talk about one, which
Sure.
is Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you're both familiar with the God delusion.
Yes.
In the second chapter on monotheism, at the bottom of the first paragraph, Dawkins writes about Confucianism and Buddhism. There is something to be said for treating these not as religions at all, but as ethical systems and philosophies of life. But I never hear anybody say what is to be said. But I've heard, I believe, certainly Matt, lump Buddhism into a religion. And I would like to argue that there is something called Buddhism that is not a religion.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and concede right off the bat that there are a couple of things that are called Buddhism. Some are probably appropriately lumped in with religions to some extent, and some most definitely aren't. But from a legal standpoint, we had an issue in Austin where the Buddhists were going to build a temple, and they couldn't get tax exempt status because Texas wouldn't recognize them as a religion, and they fought to be identified in that way. And so, at least for that case, or among those individuals, there's an aspect of the argument, but it goes back to what you were saying before, where religion can mean so many different things in different contexts. Right. You know, atheism is protected with the exact same status of a religion according to the First Amendment. But in the colloquial sense of what people normally identify as a religion, atheism definitely doesn't qualify. And when I was at UT for Hate-Free Week, they had a bunch of people representing a bunch of different religions or beliefs, including myself, and there was a Buddhist there. He was the only one that I took exception to, but it was really to kind of make a joke about a fine philosophical point. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm not a Buddhist, and I don't know enough about the varieties and the prevalence. I just know that from what I've read, the majority of Buddhists don't have any concept of an intelligent, creative, supernatural being that's anthropomorphic or anything. So,
well, may I propose three different categories of Buddhism?
Sure.
Okay. There's first the religious Buddhism. It is a supernatural proposition.
Reincarnation, all that?
Reincarnation, and just, I don't believe in reincarnation. I believe what Samuel Clemens said. I think it's also true for me that I was dead for millions of years before I was born, and it didn't inconvenience me in the slightest.
Yeah.
And so things like reincarnation, that if they pray to Buddha or the Bodhisattvas, that they will extend some metaphysical hand and righten their spirit or something like that. An idea of literal hells where you can go.
Yeah, the Niraj, is that how it's pronounced?
I have no idea. I don't actually speak.
Okay. I included them, when I did the hell lecture, I included the Buddhist hells as a way of demonstrating that at least within, and I'll start using your terminology probably to distinguish, but within religious Buddhism, they also had some concept of a hell, although it was very different both in what it was and what its purpose was than conventional.
The third type I have,
Wait, we didn't get a second.
I know. It's a small segue,
You're
a small aside.
in suspense. Okay.
The third type, the philosophical Buddhism, I believe also addresses the hells, but it has a different explanation for them. And remind me to bring those up when we get there. The second type of Buddhism is cultural Buddhism. And these are basically cultural practices that were adapted when Buddhism came and included into the Buddhism. For instance, we can say the Easter Bunny is not a Christian practice, nor really should the celebration of Easter, when it is, be. I think I should say it shouldn't be celebrated then, because that's obviously not where the Bible says.
Yeah, so it would be viewed more as culturally Christian.
Right. So that would be a cultural Christian practice. It's
I'd toss Christmas in there as well myself. But
Well, we have
And-
cultural Jews as well who are atheists, right? So go ahead.
And this essentially happened, as far as I've been able to figure out, because monks would go, abroad to talk about their ideas, and they would meet a group of new people who would say something like, "We believe that our God ejaculated from his forehead, and that's why only men can sniff snuff from a monkey bowl." And they say, "Okay, well, in the meantime, I have this idea about how your brain works and how you view the world." And then the culture would say, "Well, we got all this stuff, God ejaculates, monkey bowl snuff, and this is also maybe how our brain works." And the monk would say, "That's fine."
Yeah.
They weren't really interested in changing their culture. And so are we ready for the third one?
Sure.
Okay, I think the third one would then be philosophical Buddhism, and it's more, and that's mostly what I've studied, outside of curious about what other people believe. And
So this is the meditation and introspection and these sorts of things. Mm-hmm.
And to me, this is much more like psychology than it is like a religion. When I've studied it, no one has ever said, "Believe me." They say, "This is what I see." And you investigate it for yourself. It's not any different than studying a humanity at a school.
There's a pretty famous atheist named Sam Harris who wrote a number of books. He wrote The End of Faith and Letter to a Christian Nation, and I think he ascribes to these beliefs as well, or this sort of viewpoint.
And I think those are very different from the other two types of Buddhism, and much more accessible, particularly when put into modern English words.
Yeah, granted, from my point of view, I'm not identifying as a Buddhist in any sense. There are definitely some aspects of Buddhism, of religious Buddhism, I would object to probably the most. I think there are some things, if I'm understanding how you're using the term with regard to cultural Buddhism, that I'd probably object to as well.
But that's a cultural opinion, really.
Right.
No.
But yes, it's not. It has nothing to do with the religious aspect, and probably not anything to do with my skepticism of the supernatural or anything. I'm concerned that cultural Buddhism has been used in ways that are potentially harmful. I don't know that that's the case, and I'm not an expert. Philosophical Buddhism, I probably don't have a whole lot of a problem with any more than to me it's not a big issue of whether somebody's a proponent of David Hume or Immanuel Kant or whatever else. I have much fewer objections to what I hear from Buddhists of pretty much every stripe. I mean, I realize that evidently from the reports I received, there are some religious Buddhists which would actually qualify as extremists who, and I don't know how this fits in with it, but have actually taken violent action and other things against others, which is contrary to what my initial perception of what Buddhism is. But it does make me wary.
Yeah. Those are, I don't know the specific actions, but there's one of the old Buddhist texts, not written by Buddha, but written by people who developed the ideas later on. And I think it's called the Book of Wicked Things, essentially. And it discusses the things that are traditionally forbidden, such as taking life, or committing suicide, or consuming alcohol, or any of the vices that Buddhists would usually
where
try to avoid.
Where do those ultimately derive from? Is it anything more than tradition?
What do you mean?
These rules, these forbidden things.
I think it's philosophical ethics. Some of it is, Matt, do I correctly understand that you do not drink alcohol?
I don't currently.
Okay.
I will be again. That's pretty much guaranteed. I stopped when I found out I was diabetic.
That's fair. James Randi, I think, is a better example. Now that he doesn't drink alcohol because he wants to be as aware of the world as he can be. And since philosophical Buddhism is essentially trying to change our perception of the world and take input in without certain biases, that alcohol should be avoided because it numbs and dulls the mind and makes perceiving the world difficult.
So it's derived from a first principle then.
Right.
Penn and Teller are of that opinion as well, and it's one of the reasons, even when I do drink, I can't remember the last time that I've legitimately been drunk. I can remember when I was mildly intoxicated, but most of the time it's like a margarita after dinner, or maybe two if it's a particularly good day. But yeah, I much prefer, I like the way things feel, and I like the way my brain works when it's unimpaired by alcohol and drugs. And so, while I'm not completely straight edge and don't advocate that, I think I like the fun and exploration of enjoying life as well, so that I can kind of lose a little control on occasion. But I definitely see the justification behind that and why so many people have advocated it.
Right. And so then I'd like to point out that it's not because there's something ontologically wrong with consuming alcohol.
Yeah.
In fact, many Buddhists will drink quite prodigiously without a sense of shame.
Okay.
I may be one of them.
Hey,
I'm from Wisconsin. I'm sorry.
you're not calling from Austin, are you?
It's those long winters, yeah.
That's too bad, because if you were in Austin when the show was over, you could go down to Threadgills with us, and we could see, whether or not we can both have a margarita.
Okay. So, but then with, say, killing people, in the Book of Forbidden Things, if that's what it's called, there's a section about I'm sorry, I'm stammering. Would it be okay to kill somebody if they were evil and refused to righten themselves? Is the question. And the answer is yes. Although typically in the Buddhism I've studied, they would say no, because you were supposed to respect life, not destroy it, because that leads to a certain mindset that propagates itself, and then we end up destroying more life, hence the vegetarianism. It's a basic meditation on respecting
I'm concerned, I'm curious about how they defined evil in order to make that determination. Degrees of evil?
I think evil would just sort of be callousness and uncaring actions towards other human beings, especially murder, theft, things that are done solely for selfish reasons that don't really need to be done.
Yeah, and see, this is one of the problems, and obviously I'm not taking issue with you. This is across the board where we have yet another word that's poorly defined, and when you have a statement that is, or a question about whether or not it's justified to kill somebody who's evil, and the views of evil are potentially broad.
Right.
I think even when the definition is fairly narrow, Personally, I would still tend to side towards no. I mean, granted, I can completely understand, for example, the father who discovers the individual who raped and murdered his daughter. I can understand the desire for vengeance, and I would say, for the most part, even though I'm not going to advocate, vigilante justice, I'd say if he killed him, justice was actually served. It may not be the best possible course of action. There may have been other things that we could do. I don't want to get into a long discussion on death penalty, but I think in that case, justice is probably served. But I don't know that that's the broad case and the kind of general evil that is ill-defined.
Well, it's actually kind of a trick question, then. So I think I have satisfactorily explained that it's not supernatural evil. Mm-hmm. There's not something spiritually corrupt about him.
Yeah.
It's just his mindset is off. But basically, because of the frailties of our perception of the world, the Buddhist thought would posit that, but you can't know that. You can't know that, although if you could know, it would be acceptable to kill him, this evil person. You can't know it. You
can't know which one?
That that he's so evil that he will never, there's no
Right.
chance he will ever become good, and he will just create a great amount of misery in the world.
Right. That's another point that hit me right off the bat, but I got sidetracked by that. That you're presuming that that this is irreparable, that rehabilitation isn't a problem, isn't possible, or the ability to make amends isn't possible. And
Right.
and in some cases, people would assert that there's no way to make amends for that. That you've killed a unique life, for example, and that no amount of good can completely compensate for that. But yeah, I mean, they're interesting questions, and one of the things that I like about at least most of the Buddhists that I've talked to, who frankly I'm expecting that mostly I talk to philosophical Buddhists, is that I appreciate the questioning aspect. I appreciate that there's nothing really so much in the way of dogma. That's something that I can understand, and of course they're not knocking on my door, giving me tracts and asking me to come be a Buddhist as well, which is appealing.
Right. So I'd kind of like to let the show go on and have other people get a chance. Is there a question you want to ask me before I go?
No, I think Don might.
I don't think so. I think I did want to respond to one thing that you said, and that is the multi-headed hydra. I think that when I'm personally talking about religion, I'm generally focusing on this notion of a personal God, some sort of God that you believe in, that you can trade with, and I think that this is effectively a kind of evil concept. It's inherently a bad thing, and the reason I believe that is that it sets you up into some sort of trade with this God, right? You want to get some sort of special favors. You want to get an afterlife. You want to get a blessing. You want to get some sort of edge in the world from this God, and you're happy to trade with that God. And what you end up trading, I think, is sort of a slippery slope.
Your soul.
As you become more and more zealous, you trade. You sell out your fellow man ultimately for it.
You sell out your humanity, and they actually, at least within a lot of the more evangelical, outspoken Christians, selling out your humanity is actually expressly stated and encouraged.
You want to be godly.
Humanity is intrinsically evil. It's a good thing to sell that out, and that to me is one of the most offensive things about Christianity. And it was something that it took me a long time to realize. How did I not see that?
Yeah. So I don't have an issue with Buddhism, and I don't have an issue with deism,
but we appreciate
these other religions.
We appreciate the kind of clarification on the different types, so that maybe I'm more accurate. Yeah. I imagine there's going to be Christians calling in to tell me their various denominations. Save the phone call, because there are thousands of Christian denominations, and you guys disagree on every single point of doctrine, from whether or not Jesus was God to whether the Trinity exists, whether there's a hell. It's pretty much pointless. If you're going to keep the same name and not distinguish yourself even by a name change, you're going to get lumped in with the guys you don't agree with on occasion. Sorry.
I just thought of something. We were going to bring up the Buddhist hells in philosophical Buddhism.
Okay, but I got callers that have been waiting since before Don started talking.
Maybe I'll call back another time after.
Okay, please do. You might try to call back later on the show. But thanks a lot for calling. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the time. Good luck.
Bye.
Goodbye.
We got. Is it Stephen?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for holding.
No problem. I had a quick thing, because I was actually online watching all the old shows and stuff, and there was I think it was you, Matt, and Russell were on the show doing a show about stupid atheists.
Foolish atheists.
Yeah. Oh, foolish atheists. I'm sorry.
That was one of our more popular shows.
I'm sure some of them are stupid too, but foolish atheist was what we went with.
Oh yeah, just listening to that guy, just me beating my head against the walls.
Yeah. We keep getting email about that show in particular, and
we've gotten several hundred responses.
He who shall not be named on this program ever again has been getting emails as well, and despite his claim that he did it all as a joke or a test, an experiment, to see if we would respond rationally. And of course, his admission of this came after we received, 50 or so who disagreed with him. Now he is just taken to responding to people who send him emails with obscenities about, the atheist movement, and this is ancient history, and leave me alone. So if you're still watching, if you're somebody who's going through the archives and you've watched or are getting ready to watch the Foolish Atheist episode, there is no longer any need to email either us or the individual in question. But if you want to email him anyway, I'm not going to stop you.
Okay. Now, one question about the show was, I think it was mentioned that I think communists were supposed to be foolish atheists, and I was trying to figure out how that was. I think that's right, or how that worked, because communism isn't synonymous with atheism.
I can explain that.
I would appreciate it.
Back in the 50s, after World War II, there was this very strong tension between the United States and Russia. And there became kind of a propaganda sent about in the United States that we're not like those evil communists, those evil Russians, because let's go up around and find something. Because we believe in God. So we are the theists and they are the godless communists. And so atheism and communism got to be strongly associated. And to be fair, the communists more or less stamped out religion as something that was sort of against the religion, if you will, of communism. And so they actually suppressed a lot of religions in a way of bringing up their dogma of communism. And so that's the path that they sort of took. And we took the path of, we're going to distinguish ourselves and call ourselves religious. And this is a time when we had the McCarthy scare. We had the motto on the U.S. motto becoming "In God We Trust." We had all sorts of things. We had the "Under God" added to the pledge. The big push on the Ten Commandments monuments. All this stuff was in response to this, and so many people who are familiar with this think, if you're an atheist, you must be a communist, or there's a strong association.
Right.
And if you talk with atheists who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s, it's interesting because they don't want to use that word atheist because of all this bad stigma associated with that. So it's very interesting to see that, the social phenomena, that these two get stuck together, and boy, if you're an atheist, you must be a pinko. And I think that was the genesis of that comment, is that yes, they might be atheists, but they're not atheists that we agree with.
We actually addressed this issue in an email discussion, or I did. I don't have the access to my email right now, so I won't bother boring you by reading what I wrote in response. But the thing about communism as to why it would qualify as foolish atheist is, and it's caused a lot of confusion, as Don pointed out, is that what they did was they essentially enforced an establishment of atheism by outlawing religion. This is not a secular society, and it's not truly an atheist society, because there's nothing within atheism to support this. This was an anti-religious society. I could never, anywhere, for any reason, support the banning, prohibiting of religion. I don't want to infringe on people's rights to follow the dictates of their conscience or to express and participate in their religious traditions. I want people to give up religion for rational reasons on their own. Outlawing and banning it is a bad idea. And it wasn't necessarily atheism that was the problem with communist Russia. It was the communism part, and not even just the communism. It was the corruption and the control that they tried to exert by saying, we're now an atheist state. I'm not going to try and do a Russian accent. Hey, if you're in Russia...
it would be more like, we are now an atheist party. I'm sorry.
Wow, which reminds me, if there's listeners in Russia, I don't think we've heard from
That's one of
Russia
the
yet.
countries we haven't heard from.
There's no problem with Russia.
Yeah.
But no, I was just, like I said, I was just looking back at it, and I think my issue is because of the current, political climate, I guess. People use scare words like communist, socialist, and stuff. And the thing is,
Liberal's a scare word now.
huh?
Liberal's a scare word now.
Yeah, liberal's a scare word. They're free thinker, rationalist is a scare word.
Yeah.
But I was like, I've done this whole thing, the whole spiel online where I'm just arguing with people about the fact that, look, there's a difference between you and the USSR and what they were doing in actual communism and difference, and, and socialism and all these things that are like horribly different. So when I read and I heard that, I was like, okay, are they talking about the McCarthy era communism, or are they talking about Cherokee communism? Because Cherokee communism worked fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's one of the reasons why, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine earlier today, that I think I'm not a communist, I'm not a socialist, but I think that we've kind of gotten this knee-jerk reaction to those words where that's evil. Well, I don't know. There may be some ideas within communism or socialism that might actually be good ideas that would work in, for example, our representative republic or a democracy. So just because something is consistent with a political, economical, social structure that failed miserably and is bad when put in place all at once, doesn't mean that every aspect of it is bad, just as it doesn't mean that every aspect of democracy or republics are good or bad. I think we're a long way from figuring out exactly what will work best for everybody. I just hope we keep working towards it without
Prejudice.
Yeah, or falling into fascist impositions, which was the problem. When you impose dictates on what people are supposedly allowed to believe, which is absurd because we're talking about what's in people's head. So really you're limiting their freedom to express what their beliefs are. It's not like, Russian citizens really all stopped believing. It's that the believers were, imposed upon you can no longer express this. Where the guy who emailed us basically said something to the effect of, why don't you go live in Russia or Cuba and see how good it is to be in an atheist society? I got news for you. Those aren't atheist societies.
Yeah, they're not atheist societies. And
by the way,
societies either.
I'm not sure I want to live in an atheist society. I definitely don't want to live in one where it's imposed, or I wouldn't want to replace "In God We Trust" on our bills with "In Nothing We Trust" or "There is no God." I just want it removed. Get it out of there. Make it secular. Make it neutral with regard, so that everybody is free to practice what their beliefs are, to have their beliefs, to express them. It's absurd. The fact of the matter is,
let the best ideas win.
You want to point out an atheist state to show how well it works. There's never been one, but the closest ones are some European countries that are the majority atheist, and they have secular constitutions, they have secular governments, they beat out this great and wonderful country that I love in so many really important categories. Doesn't mean we need to necessarily emulate them, doesn't mean everything they've got's working. There is no atheist government. But secular governments, there are. And ours was established as one. It needs to constantly be protected, and everyone who cares about their freedoms needs to constantly strive to make sure that we're not only protecting the secularism we've got, but moving us back to the secularism that we should have had all along before some religious zealots decided that they needed to control what everybody else can do.
Yeah, the state religion won't be your religion.
All right. Thank you. I agree with you guys wholeheartedly. I'm going to go back to watching the old shows and let you get on with your show.
Okay. All right. Thanks Steve.
For calling. Have a good day.
Thanks for the call. We've got...
Take one more and then we'll go.
We got one more we can go. Jackie, are you on the line?
Yes.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Are you in Austin?
No, I'm in Boston.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I need to start asking because I'm wondering if we're getting any calls from Austin today.
No, I just recently found you guys on YouTube, and I've been listening to the podcast, and I recently saw the show about religious scamlets, and I saw that you were revisiting that topic today.
And we are.
Yes, and I had a comment to make about it because living in Boston, one of the biggest religious problems with taking money had to do with the pedophilia priests, which centered in Boston. And I went to Catholic school from 4th grade to graduating high school. And I'm an atheist. I've been an atheist since I was 16, but one of the things that the whole pedophilia thing affected was the fact that people stopped giving donations to the church, and instead of taking that money away from people like Bernard Law, who was, making all this money and living rich, they took it away from the schools. And my high school got closed the year I graduated. Luckily, I was able to finish it out because I didn't want to go to a new school. Even being atheist, I understood the importance of religions being able to have their own school, because in Boston, if it was a cheap alternative to a place like Dorchester High and Southie High, which weren't always the best, and some people, even if they weren't Catholics, still sent their children to that school because they liked it a bit better than the public school system.
Right.
So it was really sad how all these, pedophilia priests and everything that happened with the shuffling them around and not punishing them, it affected people, and they were donating their money for things like schools, to exist, and they closed down because they got sued over what they should have been punished for and put to jail for.
Yeah, and I'm wondering how much of that money ended up going to lawyers to fight some of those cases while they shuffled priests around to...
Well, the corrupt people are in charge, and so it's the good stuff that gets cut, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I went to I grew up in one of the parishes that was victimized by Father Dagan. My kindergarten teacher was his sister, so it's one of those things that have always been prevalent, the whole pedophilia thing. But there was this one priest who I actually really admired this guy, because he told our 8th grade class when it was time to get confirmed that it's a choice, not a tradition, and that you have the choice and you guys need to think about what you believe before you get confirmed. And because of that, I actually looked at what I believed, and that was very instrumental into me becoming an atheist. And this very priest was punished, him and his partner, for basically trying to bring the parish up into the 21st century and trying to, get things to not be so in the past. And the older parishioners didn't like it, and they complained enough that not only was he removed from the church, but he wasn't even given another parish. He was put on emergency service, basically to punish him. Yeah. And yet all these pedophile priests were moved around.
Yeah, people who want to look at now Lilith's got me cautious about the religious word, but look at various organized religions and ignore the politics that occur within the religion, from the selecting of a pastor in a Baptist church, to determining where church funds and monies go, to determining how they're going to raise it, to determining what to do. If the congregation all of a sudden decides that this man of God that they for years have believed is a representative to guide them no longer agrees with their views, so it's time to oust him, even if his views didn't particularly change.
Exactly.
There's a lot of politics that goes on there. I want to make one. I know you've got something. I want to make one comment before Don goes on, as kind of a teaser, because there are so many people who are calling in from out of town. I'm not making a promise, but I'm saying stay tuned, because there is a possibility in the near future that you may be actually able to watch it streaming live on the internet.
That is awesome.
We'll find out soon.
That.
We'll find out soon, and we'll let everybody know whether it works or not. And if you're in Austin and you haven't called, what the hell's wrong with you? And also, we're going to Threadgills after the show's over. We're on for another 11 minutes or so, and then we'll be down at Threadgills on Riverside. Any atheist or atheist-friendly persons welcome to join us. Don, I know you wanted to say something.
Oh, I just wanted to emphasize that the Catholic Church is especially very hierarchical and very conscientious about keeping the dogma centralized and under control, and creativity by these priests is generally not tolerated. So that's actually par for the course for them, I would say.
Yep.
So that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, it was really sad when the priest had to leave. It was actually the priest and his partner priest. And even though by the time they were kicked out I was an atheist, I still went to the service to, say goodbye, because if he wasn't so honest about the fact that Catholicism is a choice, I think I would still be a Catholic, and I'm very happy to be an atheist. So he did a lot for me.
Yeah, well, I'm very impressed by what he did.
Did you give that priest name?
No, I don't know if I really want to say his name.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Somebody was curious.
Anybody any trouble. But I'm impressed with someone who would do that. That's
yeah,
great.
it really was great to have somebody actually, not try to indoctrinate me, but just try to, say that this is a choice.
Yeah.
But I love your show. Thanks for taking my call, and I will continue to listen. I hope it can go to streaming, because that would be awesome.
I think it'd be awesome too. Thanks a lot for calling in. We'll hear from you soon, maybe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. I guess we got to keep taking these. I don't know if we're going to.
We can keep. We
We've
can
got about
okay.
a handful of minutes left.
Just to let the audience know, I'm going to be hitting the scamlets thing again, maybe twice more, because I've got so much material. And I was going to talk about codependence and sin as scams.
If Tracy and I can do 3 shows on Batman.
Okay. Well, I'm actually moving forward.
Which I love. We've got John on the phone. You there, John?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, thanks for waiting. What do you got for us?
Well, I'm just making a couple of, make a couple of comments. I just got the tail end of the show. I'm sitting here watching you guys on TV, but I'm listening in my cell phone, so it's kind of off a bit. And
the best thing to do is to turn the TV down when you're on the phone.
It's not your cell phone. There actually is a delay from what you're going to hear on any phone. So.
Okay. Well, you got your phone call from Austin, and it just so happens I am a Christian.
Mm-hmm. I forgive you.
Huh?
I said I forgive you.
We're teasing you.
I forgive you guys too, man.
Hey.
My comment is that you guys are talking about scams, and I just want to say the church today, he is correct. You are correct in the fact that there is a sect of people out there that are scamming the religious, if you want to call it religious. I don't call myself religious. I'm a follower of Christ, and they're stealing the money. They're lining their own pockets, and the Bible specifically touches on this. And the Lord has given us through Scripture the indication that this will happen. But
so let me interrupt a second here. You don't believe you're going to get a future reward?
Future reward for
in the great heaven, the great go visit God and spend your life with God. You don't believe you're going to?
If I give my money?
Well, no. I'm just saying for your participation or whatever.
One of Don's points was, regardless of the money that's being taken, and I'm glad we agree there. I think almost anybody would agree on that. That considering that everybody's happy to point at every other religion and say that they're wrong. Obviously, they think that some of those are scams. But Don's point was that the idea of the promise of an afterlife that is unverifiable is in itself a scam.
Well, I don't believe.
Well, I expect you to disagree with me, so that's okay. So I'm not hurt by it. It's just.
Yeah. I don't believe that it's a reward. I believe that an individual came and died and paid a price, and it is by grace that human beings are even allowed to enter eternal life. If you're asking me the question, do I believe in eternal life? I would absolutely 100% say yes. I don't believe in a Big Bang theory or I came from an ape or something of that nature. If you look at the human body itself, you can see that the human body it has to be by design. If you look in the cosmos and the way the cosmos is set up, it has to be, to me, and to, I would say, the rest of the Christians that believe in Jesus, that is by design.
What about the Christians who strongly disagree with you, like Francis Collins, the head of the Human Genome Project, who says that the DNA evidence alone is enough to confirm common ancestry, regardless of the fossil record, and I've forgotten his name, who was key witness in the Dover trial, Ken Miller, who brilliantly continues to point out that we have a way of identifying this common ancestry issue, and right down to the fact that it's chromosome 2 that was fused, and that was the impetus for the dividing point along those branches. And I guess I'll let you try and answer both of them. We're almost out of time. The other thing is you say the human body looks like it has to be designed. I agree, but that's what you're saying is that there's something about a designer that it is necessarily intelligent. And what the theory of evolution by natural selection tells us is that natural selection designs and molds our body. It makes it, and it's not a thing deciding, but the process produces things that are most fit for their environment. That is a design process. It's just not intelligently guided.
Well, I agree with you to a point. I agree that there is evolution. There has to be evolution. We are constantly evolving. The computers, everything, our intelligence is constantly evolving. But there's a creator behind that.
And you notice how?
Bill Gates is the creator of computers. Without Bill Gates, there would be no creator of a computer.
Actually, Bill Gates didn't create the computer, but even if he did, what does that have to do?
Well, the software. I'm using that as an analogy.
I understand, and what I'm
just
saying...
address that issue by saying that yes, it looks like there's design, but it's designed by a process that has no conscience.
You're making claims about what the type of designer is.
Well, God is the designer of the human race.
I understand that that's what you believe. I'm asking why you believe that, what evidence there is, because the evidence does not support your belief.
The evidence is everything that is seen and everything that is unseen.
Yes, I'm familiar with Romans very well. I was studying to be a pastor. I understand you can quote Scripture. I'm asking what reason do you have for believing that? Because I have seen no evidence to support the idea.
There is thousands and thousands of documents of archaeology that combats the question that you just asked me about the research, the other Christian researches.
What archaeological documents could possibly exist to confirm the nature of a creator? Give me an example.
Well, as far as what now?
I asked what reason, what evidence there was to support your idea that there was an intelligent creator and not a natural creative process.
Because everything is set in a natural motion.
Yeah,
everything.
natural.
If you look at everything, even within the universe, it just can't appear out of nothing.
Well, you'll have to. No, there is no scientific explanation, no scientific theory that says all this came out of nothing. You have a fundamental misunderstanding. I hope you call in again next week because I'd like to talk about this more. But I also hope you go and read some things about what science actually says and whether or not there's evidence to support what you're saying. There's a list of the crew. We thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks, Don, for sitting here patiently while I got ready to vent. We'll be back again next week, Channel 16, 4:30 to 6 p.m. See you then.